Welcome back to Korean Cinema Today, the official podcast of the Korean Film Council. Here in Seoul on a beautiful sunny day to start off our second season of Korean Cinema Today. I'm one of your hosts, Pierce Conran, and today we have our co-host with us again. So once again, that is Nemo Kim, the Korea correspondent for Variety, the influential international film journal, and she's also an Asian film critic for Sight and Sound. And joining us today for a special discussion on the new Korean films that are screening at the Venice and Toronto International Film Festivals is Professor Mark Raymond, the assistant professor of Kwangwon University and also the author of Hollywood's New Yorker, The Making of Martin Scorsese. So again, I'm your host, Pierce Conran. I'm a writer for the Korean Film Council for twitchfilm.com and a producer with 2MR Films. So guys, thanks so much for being here today. Nemo, it's a pleasure to have you in the studio again.
Good to be here.
And Mark, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
All right. So today we're talking about a lot of Korean films that are screening at Venice and Toronto. So first thoughts here. I guess we'll start on Venice being the first one up. We have 3 new filmmakers here. So Nemo, you want to give us a rundown of these films that are screening at Venice this year?
Yes, a very interesting time of the year with Venice happening as we speak. We have 3 films going to Venice from established Korean names, Kim Ki-duk and Hong Sang-soo and Im Gon-taek. Not much of a surprise here in terms of the names. Their latest films going to Venice, One-on-One from Kim Ki-duk. It's going to be Venice Day's opening film. So it's going to be the international premiere of that film. And Hong Sang-soo's latest offering, Hill of Freedom, that will get the world premiere there. And Im Gon-taek will screen his 102nd film there. So very, very exciting, huge names at Venice this year.
Absolutely. And so, Mark, I want to jump in here with you. I know, of course, that you were a big fan of Hong Sang-soo.
Yes.
So is this a film you're looking forward to?
Yeah, well, I always look forward to Hong Sang-soo's work, and especially this film. I think the fact that he's working with an international cast again, with a Japanese actor, and also with Moon So-ri, who he's worked with before. Especially, she had a very big role in Ha Ha Ha, which came out about 4 years ago now. So I'm very excited to see him working with her again, since I think she's one of the best actors working anywhere in the world.
Right.
And so, yeah, Hong Sang-soo's work, I mean, it's one of those things where if you're somebody who's a fan of Hong Sang-soo, you're always excited for his work, even because there's such a high level of consistency. You kind of know basically what you're going to get, but you're kind of excited for the variations. Whereas if you're somebody who doesn't, then I guess you're just like, oh, it's another Hong Sang-soo film. But certainly it's one of my most anticipated films of the fall.
Excellent.
So on a personal level, if I can just butt in there, Moon So-ri, it must be really exciting for her because Venice is where she got her major international award for acting for Oasis,
That's
I
right.
remember.
Yeah,
so
the Marcello Mastroianni Award for Rising Star. I don't know if you know this, Mark. The film is 67 minutes long.
Yes.
Which is extremely short. Even by Hong Sang-soo's films have gotten shorter and shorter, it seems. How do you feel about this kind of truncation of his films?
I'm never going to complain about a short film. It's always one of my philosophies. If you can leave them wanting more, that's fine. Especially with so many films I find are kind of overlong, especially coming out of Hollywood and places like that today. There's the idea that you have to make a 2 or 2.5 hour film, even if the story doesn't demand it. So I'm quite, and like you said, it is kind of a trend that Hong has been going towards recently, where his films are at 80 minutes and 90 minutes, and so the fact that he's getting down to 67 minutes, he's kind of pushing the limits of what's a feature film, what's a short.
I know.
But yeah, I'm always curious to see it. Yeah.
I also wanted to get your take on the international acting contributions. He had Isabelle Huppert, and now he has a well-known Japanese actor. What do you think about that?
I'm always interested in that idea that he's going to take these foreign stars or foreign, maybe not stars, or at least well-known actors, especially within the festival circuit where his films circulate anyway, and kind of mixed them in with Korean actors as well, which is always the case. And of course, Hong Sang-soo, one of the things about, even though he makes these very low-budget films, of course, he always attracts very big names within the Korean industry, right? So
that's right.
So he's bringing those actors in. And then, and I'm not sure. I'll be curious how this works. The Isabelle Huppert performance in another country, and that film itself has always been one that I found one of the least satisfying of Hong Sang-soo's films, but at the same time, one that I find really interesting for that mixture of the fact that how does he deal with a foreigner coming in this case, into Korea, and how does she interact with the society? So I found it an interesting film, even if maybe it wasn't as compelling as some of his others. So we'll see what happens with this mixture here.
Especially as a non-Korean living in Korea yourself, it must have been pretty interesting to see that.
Yeah, I think he actually nailed those aspects exactly, actually, within another country. So it'll be interesting to see what he does with a Japanese lead in this case.
And as we mentioned earlier, another huge name in Korean cinema going to Venice this year, Im Kwon-taek. Very exciting. Although some may think, everybody knows about him and his films. What do you think about that, guys?
Im Kwon-taek is always somebody I'm interested in sort of seeing his films, and especially kind of looking at the plot description of this one. It seems a lot more sort of a compelling to me, like in terms of he's dealing with the plot outline is a middle-aged man whose wife is dying, and then he's attracted to this younger woman. And it seems like maybe a more modern kind of contemporary story, whereas Im Kwon-taek has in the past been more interested in Korean history.
Yes.
In the film, especially the film, I'm not sure if it's his 100th or 101st. I get confused a bit. The film Hanji.
He's made so many.
Yeah, that was 101. His last
101, yes.
4 years ago now.
And that one did seem very much like part of it was very much about he wanted to tell this story about Korean history because it was very important to him. And as a result, I'm not sure if the film may have suffered a bit dramatically as a result of that. And so this one seems like it's a type of film that will be more interested in seeing, and also I think it might be a film that might get some international attention.
Right.
Since it's playing not only in Venice but also in Toronto as well. So we'll see how it goes over.
And as you mentioned, Professor Raymond, a very universal topic that many men all over the world may find quite familiar with, perhaps.
Touching too close to home for some, you mean?
Peers. All right. So Im and Venice, they have a very strong and fairly old connection with each other. He took the surrogate woman back in the 90s to Venice, for which he got, I believe it was Korean cinema's first major international award after the Moscow Award. Yeah, it would be home ground for him almost, wouldn't it?
I mean, Im Kwon-taek sort of made his sort of reputation in internationally, at least, really in the late 80s, early 90s, and into that period where some of his films started to sort of move outside of just being well-known in Korea and then becoming these sort of international success maybe is too strong a word, but certainly they were critically very well received in these countries. And eventually that success moved into even North America, where he had some films in the late 90s, early 2000s, where he got some a play on the international, in the sort of art cinema market in the United States. So, and this seems like the type of film that may also lead to that.
Also find the casting of An Sung-gi as the cheating middle-aged guy very interesting. I heard that he found the role a little bit too different from his real self, and he was kind of joking in a way when he said it, but very interesting casting.
Absolutely. Of course, they've worked together a lot before.
Yes, that's right.
Good to see them together again. And so third, last but certainly not least among this year's Korean films at Venice is, of course, the new Kim Ki-duk film, 1-on-1. This is the third year on the trot. He's been at Venice, following, of course, his historic Golden Lion win for Piazza in 2012, and last year's Moebius, which screened out of competition. So 1-on-1, this film opened in Korea back in May in small theatrical release. They're premiering a new international cut at Venice. It's the opening film of Venice Days. So Kim Ki-duk back at Venice. Not a big surprise here. What are your thoughts on that, Mark?
Well, I'm not the largest Kim Ki-duk fan in the world, but I found the last couple films compelling, at least, even if there were maybe problematic aspects to it. Moebius, in particular, was a film that got a lot of attention, actually, in North America, just because it was such a wild movie, right? It was a film that some people were just shocked by. Other people thought it was this dark comedy, and so it had that kind of mixed reception.
It's true, yeah. So foreigners seem to think it more of a comedy than local audiences, I think.
Yes, I got that too. Heard something very interesting about Moebius. I know it's kind of a little bit off topic for today, but I found out from the main actress yesterday that she was told, I think 3 or 4 hours before the shoot, that she had to actually play the mom as well, because Kim changed his mind or the actress who was going to play the mom changed her mind and pulled out.
Wow,
so very interesting situation. I didn't know that.
And that completely explains why she plays both characters now.
That's right.
A lot of people had asked that, actually.
Right. So 1-on-1. Did you like it, Piers?
To be honest, I haven't seen it yet. I was just sent a link today, so ask me that next week.
I actually quite liked it.
Yeah.
And I know that you mentioned, Mark, that you're not Kim Ki-duk's biggest fan in the world.
No, I'm not, I have to admit.
I guess my fandom is kind of getting bigger for him. Yeah.
He's certainly a very polarizing director.
Yes, indeed.
Yeah. And he's certainly not an uninteresting one. I'm always interested to see his films, even if I don't like them always. Yeah. And this one, I'll be interested to see. I mean, in terms of what I've read about it, it seems like it may not be a film that will play as well internationally, since it seems so much about Korean society. I'm wondering how well it will translate, actually. Perhaps it won't. Maybe that specificity will give it like a certain will be compelling to foreign audience who want to know about Korea, maybe want to know something specific about Korea. But compared to, like, let's say his last couple of films, which seem much more big and much more about bigger themes that seem a bit more transnational than
interesting
than
point that, because he always seems to me to be someone who's very conscious of his international audiences.
Yeah,
right.
Absolutely.
We talked about how Moebius had this comedic side, unintentional comedic side. I think you may find the same with 1-on-1.
Oh, yeah.
Perchance.
All right. Certainly looking forward to that one.
So we have 3 huge names going to Venice. And talking of huge names, 2 of them are going to Toronto, which will take place from the 4th of September. And they are Hong Sang-soo and Im Gon-taek, the same films, Hill of Freedom and Revivere, going to Toronto, the Masters section.
Speaking of Toronto, it's a big year this year for Korean film. One of the yearly showcases is called the City to City lineup, and this year the city focus is Seoul. Somewhat ironic, actually, because if you look at the titles in the section, very few of them are actually shot in Seoul. But regardless of that, it's a very, very interesting lineup. I think only 1 or 2 are in Seoul. But it's a terrific lineup of films, and I'm really excited to talk about these. So we have 8 movies. We have films coming from Cannes. We have some world premieres. We have films from Jeonju and Locarno from Berlin. And it's a really extensive lineup, documentary, independent, commercial. So what are our first thoughts on this? I'm going to jump that over to you, Mark.
It's certainly an exciting program for Korean cinema. And it's already, I don't know if I mentioned, I'm actually from Canada, and I have friends who go to Toronto, and I've actually even had a few inquiries already about these films, like where some people have emailed me and said, I saw this program. I know you're Korean film. You live in Korea, and so what are the films from this program I should check out? So it is, I think, a nice opportunity, and we'll see what are sort of the reception of these films. And it's certainly a great opportunity. Toronto, of course, is the big kind of kickoff to the fall movie season in North America, right? It's where a lot of the Oscar films sort of go to get a launch, and so not that any of these films will necessarily get that kind of exposure, but it is a place where these sort of, especially as you mentioned, a lot of them are also younger directors and like maybe first or second films. They can perhaps get an exposure that they would not get even at sort of the big European festivals. I think Toronto's a whole different sort of type of exposure.
And of course, Toronto is very different from Venice in that it's almost directly related to the North release of Korean films. And as we mentioned earlier, a totally mixed bag. We have no idea, I guess we do a little bit to an extent, which films will do well in North America. And in that regard, Toronto is a very exciting place indeed for Korean films. So a very mixed bag. I want to get your take on some of the interesting choices here. What do you think, Piers? What's your favorite?
I haven't seen all of them yet, but there are really some terrific films here. The films from Cannes particularly do stand out. A Hard Day, A Girl at My Door. So we have A Hard Day as this mid-level genre film, which sounds like a fairly, run-of-the-mill, mid-level commercial film. Turned out to be just all guns firing. It was just a really fun, tight, black comedy thriller. And honestly, when that played at Cannes, it had just across the board, unanimous, glowing reviews.
Yes.
And I think that's the kind of film that could do really well in North America. It's the kind of film that has played well there in the past and could do so again. Now, A Girl at My Door is a really amazing film produced by Chang-dong, the debut of July Jung. A really amazing film. It had a good reaction at Cannes, but was somewhat forgotten a little bit. It played in the Un Certain Regard section. Personally, I loved it. I think it's one of the best films of the year, but that might have a little bit of trouble breaking out.
Yes, I have to agree with you on that one. Yes. Not an easy film to
Certainly
digest.
Not. Yeah.
And talking of films that are not too easy to digest, Gyeongju and Alive. What do you think about those films? And talking of films that are not too easy to digest, we also have Gyeongju by Jang Lee and Park Jang-bum's Alive. Park Jang-bum of The Journals of Musan.
Yeah, Journals of Musan, a great film. And here he comes with a big, huge opus, 3 hours. This was actually premiered at Jeonju this year.
Yes.
Very notable because it was one of, now they've had this thing called the Jeonju Digital Project going on every year. And this year that was upgraded to a feature-length program. Before it was an omnibus of mid-length features. So that was the first, one of them in the first batch. It's a 3-hour film. And then it went to Locarno where it won an award. Gyeongju was also at Locarno. So we have 2 films there, kind of indie movies from very significant festival names. And so that kind of gives a bit of kind of auteur class to this list, I think.
Right, Gyeongju, you called it an indie movie, but the cast was not so indie.
Not an indie cast. I agree with you there.
Very interesting cast, I thought.
Certainly.
Very well acted.
Big actor in there. A lot of people have been drawing parallels with Hong Sang-soo of this film. What would you say about that?
Yeah, certain similarities there, but I found the general tone of the film a bit lighter than Hong Sang-soo's latest films, personally.
Very good.
Yeah, dare I say, I actually prefer Jang Lee.
Well, Jang Lee gets mentioned often with Hong Sang-soo in terms of this very broad field of what's sometimes called in North America and Europe Asian minimalism. These kind of directors who want to sort of have a long take kind of style, sort of de-dramatize the narrative to some extent. And so I've always, and Shang Lu is somebody I've always been curious to actually check out. So I like to actually finally sort of see one of his films.
I would say rather unfairly criticized by some Korean critics. When Gyeongju came out, some Korean critics said, "Oh, is this a poor repetition of a Hong Sang-soo film?" But I actually personally think that is very unfair.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, often Hong Sang-soo is unfairly criticized, has repeated himself as well. So
yes,
it's not surprising that somebody who is in the same general style gets that accusation as well. I think it's
So jumping onto the other side of this kind of indie films, harder to digest, we have certainly a darker film called A Dream of Iron, a documentary that premiered at the Berlin Film Festival, directed by Kelvin Kyung Park. So Mark, I know you've seen this one. How do you feel about that, its inclusion in the city-to-city focus?
Again, it's one of those films that it's curious in that it has very little to do with Seoul, but it is almost nothing. But it is
maybe it's just the post-production part. What do you think?
Something like that.
Yeah, so it is like you said, it's a kind of an experimental kind of documentary. I kind of admired what it was trying to do. I did not think it succeeded very well. I know you're a big fan of it yourself.
I do like it a lot.
Which I could definitely see. I sort of admire one of those films you admire the ambition, even if you don't think maybe it didn't work for you. And I'm curious how it will be received in Toronto. I could see it going over very well, actually.
Yeah.
Because it's playing in this in a festival, Toronto, and that is traditionally very friendly towards documentary.
That's true.
Canada is basically known with the NFB as a documentary, one of the big documentary making countries in the world. We have a whole hot docs festival in Toronto that's also very big. So I could see this film actually gaining sort of some positive notices there. Depending on how, if their view is similar to yours or more similar to mine in terms of how they think it's executed.
Well, I certainly do hope that people like it.
But I do think it could definitely break through.
I think I'm going to remain very neutral on this point.
And I guess for me, the film is less a film than kind of an art installation.
Yes.
So it has to be approached a different way. But going to the other end of the spectrum, we have two bigger films that are having their world premieres. So, Nema, what do you think about these new films at Toronto? We have a Cart by Bu Ji-young, who previously made the film Sisters on the Road, a very small indie. And then Scarlet Innocence is a big movie of Chung Woo-sung, CJ Entertainment's Impulsong returns.
As you mentioned, very interesting to have these two offerings premiere on a worldwide scale at Toronto. Mm-hmm. And it would be very interesting to see how much of an impact for these films having the world premiere there rather than elsewhere, rather than here, for example. Impulsong, I like some of his films, but I really dislike some of his other films. Haven't seen this one yet, so I'll definitely be looking out for reviews for Scarlet Innocence. Catchy title, don't you think?
Is. Yes. It's a different title in Korean. It's Madame Bangdok or something. It's based on a local story. Certainly, Impulsong is a big stylist. Films he's made include Antarctic Journal and Hansel and Gretel, kind of big genre films.
Yeah.
And now this movie is going out in general release in early October, so I guess this is the right time to platform it. And it's certainly a commercial film, so it suits Toronto better than Venice, say.
He told me that he lost about 10 kilograms making this.
Oh, goodness.
So let's see if
sign?
all that effort came to fruition.
Absolutely. And so the other world premiere here is Cart. So this is the new film by Bu Ji-young, who made the road trip film with Kong Hyo-jin, Sisters on the Road. That was a very small indie from 5 years ago. I really liked it, but it didn't get a huge birth after that. So this is a new film. I believe this is Myung Films. So they have Revivre is also there. This is a big production house in Korea, responsible for some of the biggest titles in modern Korean film. We got an ensemble
big but
cast.
independent, I guess.
Yes, very independent.
Yes,
very much a producer-driven company, which is really interesting.
Yes.
We've got Kim
Owned
Gang-woo.
by a lady.
Yes, indeed.
Yes.
And we have Kim Gang-woo as one of the stars, and Kim Hye, is it? Yeah. And so it's very much an ensemble cast. It sounds great. I'm looking forward to seeing this. Young films are always worth a watch. So the second world premiere for Korean films here at Toronto is going to be Cart, the new film by Bu Ji-young, who 5 years ago made the road movie Sisters on the Road, starring Kong Hyo-jin. A really great little film that no one saw, sadly. Now this film,
except for you,
except for me, because I watch everything. But I'm just me. So Cart is from Myung Films, which is a really interesting company, a very producer-driven company that makes these independent mid-level releases for years now. Revivre is also one of their titles.
That's right, owned by a wonderful lady called Shim Jae-myung.
That's right. And so responsible for some of like the most significant titles in modern Korean cinema. Ensemble cast here about workers in a supermarket. And so a very interesting title that I'm looking forward to.
And it stars Kim Kang-woo and Yeom Jung-ah. And anything with, call me sexist, but anything with Kim Kang-woo in it, I'm in.
Fair enough.
Sorry, guys.
Oh, I can see the appeal.
It's interesting that the world premiere is here, as you're saying, since they're not debuting until October. So I guess these films are, they're confident that they will get good notices out of Toronto. I mean, it'd be my assumption that, or at least think that they need these or want these kind of notices. Critical buzz to kind of accumulate before they release it here.
Absolutely. I mean, Toronto's a wonderful place to start a Korean film.
And I think it's a sign that the local industry is taking more and more notice of the more important film festivals around the world and strategically having their world premieres at these places where they think are very, very important before the local release here.
So the first film, Korean film announced for Toronto this year was Haemu, which is a very big film produced by Bong Joon-ho, first film of Shim Sung-bo, who was Bong's co-writer on Memories of Murder 11 years ago. So Haemu, this is the North American premiere. It's also going to be playing in September at San Sebastian, as well as the Vancouver International Film Festival. Hardly a surprise of a name like Bong Joon-ho there. So the film really needs no introduction, but it's on release currently in Korea, a big, huge film. I'm sure people are very excited to see it. But speaking of some smaller films, we have a few other films in the Discovery section, which is for new filmmakers, and also in Wavelength, which is the documentary section. Now, what's interesting about these films is there's a lot of co-productions here, so maybe we can talk a little bit about that. Now, we have Albert Shin's Canadian-Korean co-production In Her Place in the Discovery section, and then we have Yoon Sumi's Songs from the North, which I believe is a Portugal, UK, South Korea co-production, which actually premiered in Locarno last month.
Very interesting, right? I heard from the people who work at the Busan film market that the trend these days is for co-productions, the global trend. So, yes, I guess Korean documentaries are reflecting that.
Absolutely. And we're seeing, speaking of the Busan film market, the Asian project market, released its competitors or participants this year, a huge amount of co-productions there.
That's right.
Mark, you mentioned to me a little bit earlier, because there's also another film I haven't mentioned, the short film Beep by Kim Kyung-man. That's also a documentary in Wavelength. So that and Songs from the North are both films dealing with North Korea.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that's just a really good opportunity to have some documentaries from South Korea about North Korea, because so much of the media in North America view of North Korea, and especially the threat it poses, is so diametrically opposed to how South Korea thinks about North Korea, right. Honestly. The threat level in North America makes it seem much, at least especially about a year ago when there was more, North Korea was more in the news. And I think this is an opportunity for South Korean filmmakers to bring a more nuanced kind of perspective to North Korea, or at least to give the perspective from South Korea to a North American audience, as opposed to the perspective the vast majority of people in North America get about North Korea, which probably isn't the best
not
sort of representative.
Right. Yes. So a different viewpoint from the South Koreans' point of view.
Yeah, and I think especially from a documentary kind of point of view, they can kind of get we'll see how successful these documentaries end up being as documentaries, but it's certainly a good sign to see a sort of South Korean perspective on North Korea getting into these North American festivals. Of course, it's an easier sell, too. Of course, if you're a South Korean documentary filmmaker, what does everyone know about South Korea? Exactly. It's the relationship with the North. But at the same time, that also hopefully gives an opportunity to
absolutely
deconstruct some
myths and then go from there. That's about all the time we have for today on our special episode on the Korean films playing at the Venice and Toronto Film Festivals. So 3 films at Venice. Venice is currently taking place 27th of August and finishes on September 6th, while a whopping 14 films at Toronto, including the City to City Seoul Focus. That festival is going on from September 4th to September 14th. A warm thank you to my co-host Nemo Kim. Thank you again for being in the studio.
Thank you for having me.
And thank you very much, Mark. It's a pleasure to have you again on the show. Mark was, of course, here last year discussing Hong Sang-soo.
Yes. Thank you again, Pierce.
So I hope you enjoyed our discussion on Korean films at Venice and Toronto. Thanks for tuning in and hope that you'll be listening again next time.